Buenos días, sí, funciona. Vamos a ir empezando. Solamente quería darles unas palabras de bienvenida a todos ustedes, agradecerles su presencia en esta primera sesión de los debates Elcano de este curso académico y agradecer muy sinceramente una vez más a la Fundación Botín la cesión generosa pro bono que hace de este fantástico local que utilizamos pues profusamente. Anunciarles que, por supuesto, como otros años, va a haber nuevas sesiones en el futuro. La próxima será sobre un tema interesante de geografía, geopolítica. Seguro que muchos de ustedes recuerdan aquel famoso libro de este brillantísimo comentarista del New York Times, de Friedman, El mundo es plano, ¿no? The world is flat, que tuvo un éxito enorme. La digitalización hace que el mundo sea plano, las distancias ya no cuentan, la geografía tampoco. Luego hemos tenido aquel famoso excelente libro de Kaplan, El retorno de la geografía, y recientemente otro nuevo que se discutirá y se presentará aquí posteriormente, de Tim Marshall, que es una nueva reivindicación de la geografía y de las distancias frente a esta un poco fetiche de la digitalización, ¿no? Bueno, esto es lo que tendremos y habrá más, por supuesto, a lo largo del curso. Están ustedes siempre bienvenidos aquí y gracias de nuevo por acompañarnos, gracias a la Fundación Botín, y ya con esto te dejo, Miguel, para que moderes. Gracias.
Hola, buenos días. En primer lugar, gracias al Real Instituto Elcano por invitarme a moderar este debate sobre Alemania, un país en el que estoy más que interesada y que es parte de mi vida y parte de mi mentalidad. Voy a explicar un poco cómo va a ir el acto. Primero voy a hacer una pequeña introducción y una presentación de los intervinientes y después pasaremos a un turno de intervenciones de unos 7 minutos. Después yo les plantearé una serie de preguntas y al final pues dejaremos tiempo suficiente para las preguntas que ustedes quieran realizar al panel de participantes. Como su título indica, vamos a hablar de Alemania tras las elecciones de 2017 y las consecuencias para Europa, aunque como bien se pueden imaginar, una gran parte del debate va a ir sobre la propia campaña electoral y sobre los programas que están sobre la mesa. Las elecciones alemanas en realidad cierran un año electoral en Europa que se presentaba realmente bajo negros nubarrones, con la victoria del Brexit en el Reino Unido. El aumento de la extrema derecha en Holanda y Francia tampoco hacían augurar nada bueno en las elecciones que se iban a celebrar en el mes de marzo y en el mes de abril-mayo respectivamente, pero al final, sin embargo, nos encontramos ante un panorama completamente distinto. En Holanda venció el liberal conservador Mark Rutte, que sigue al frente del gobierno, pero no tenemos que perder de vista en cualquier caso a la extrema derecha de Geert Wilders, porque el porcentaje de votos que sacó también es significativo. En Francia, aunque Le Pen no ganó, sigue siendo muy preocupante que la votaran un tercio de los franceses que acudieron a las urnas. Por lo tanto, el peligro más inminente parece que ha pasado, pero no hay que bajar la guardia. El triunfo del europeísta Emmanuel Macron, sin embargo, en las elecciones presidenciales y legislativas, abrió y abre la puerta a la esperanza en un nuevo impulso a la Unión Europea, a la integración europea, que pasa sin lugar a dudas por un relanzamiento del motor franco-alemán. Y en ese sentido, lógicamente, parece claro que la química entre Macron y Merkel, que si no nos fallan los pronósticos y las encuestas tampoco, salvo sorpresas de última hora, va a ser la ganadora de las elecciones del próximo 24 de septiembre. Y lo único que nos queda por saber realmente es cuál va a ser el color de la coalición necesaria para gobernar a Alemania, y que de ese color, sin lugar a dudas, va a depender también muy mucho la política europea y la política exterior en Alemania, y sobre todo hasta dónde va a llegar Angela Merkel en su próximo mandato. Pero, como digo, el triunfo del europeísta Emmanuel Macron abrió esa puerta a la esperanza en un nuevo impulso para impulsar y también para reformar la Unión. Esto me imagino que van a ser algunos de los puntos que vamos a terminar tratando también aquí en el debate, y las claves para saber qué consecuencias va a tener eso para Europa y para cada uno de los países europeos. En esta mesa están conmigo Jana Puglierin, Fabian Zuleeg, Ulrich Speck y Miguel Otero. Jana Puglierin, voy a presentarlos por orden de intervención. Es la primera, bueno, es la única mujer junto conmigo, con lo cual es fácil de entender que es la primera a mi derecha. Es directora de programa del Alfred von Oppenheim Center for European Policy Studies del German Council on Foreign Relations. Anteriormente fue asesora sobre desarme, control de armamento y no proliferación en el Bundestag, en el Parlamento alemán, donde también trabajó en asuntos relacionados con la política exterior y de seguridad alemana y europea. Ha ejercido como profesora en la Universidad de Bonn y en la de Chemnitz, y sus áreas de especialización son, entre otras, la política exterior de seguridad y de defensa europeas o el rol de Alemania en Europa. El segundo en intervenir, primero a mi izquierda, es Fabian Zuleeg. Es director ejecutivo y economista jefe del European Policy Center. Antes de incorporarse al European Policy Center, trabajó como analista económico en el mundo académico y en el sector público y privado. Sus investigaciones se centran sobre todo en las crisis económica y del euro, incluyendo la reforma de una nueva gobernanza económica a nivel de la eurozona. De forma regular, Fabian Zuleeg participa en los medios con análisis sobre asuntos actuales, políticos y económicos en la Unión Europea. El tercero en intervenir será Ulrich Speck, segundo a mi derecha. Es investigador asociado de la oficina en Bruselas del Real Instituto Elcano. Fue Senior Fellow de la Transatlantic Academy en Washington y profesor visitante en el Carnegie Europe en Bruselas. Trabajó también como investigador asociado del FRIDE en Madrid y fue editor del Global European Morning Brief, un boletín de noticias sobre la política exterior de la Unión Europea. Es doctor por la Universidad de Frankfurt, ha coeditado 3 libros y sus artículos se publican de forma regular en medios de diversos países, tanto de Europa como de otros países del mundo. Es columnista de política exterior para el Neue Zürcher Zeitung. Y cuarto y último en intervenir, segundo por mi izquierda, Miguel Otero, es investigador principal del Real Instituto Elcano, también es investigador asociado en el Instituto para la Unión Europea y Asia en el School of Management de París, donde también fue profesor titular de Economía Política Internacional y ha impartido docencia también en otras universidades o ha sido también investigador en diversas universidades. Sus áreas de investigación son fundamentalmente la economía europea y los mercados emergentes, y también la Unión Monetaria Europea y la cooperación monetaria en otras regiones del mundo o las relaciones monetarias y financieras internacionales. Ha publicado el libro The Euro, the Dollar and the Global Finance Crisis en 2014, si no me equivoco. Bueno, vamos a pasar ya al turno de intervenciones. En primer lugar, Jana.
Thank you very much, Pilar. Thank you to Elcano for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first time actually in Madrid ever, and I'm very happy about the sun, because in Berlin it's already autumn and freezingly cold, and here I enjoyed a wonderful morning. So thank you very much for having me. Unfortunately, I'm not able to speak Spanish, so I will continue in English. But I try to make my points very clear, nevertheless. So I was asked to give you kind of a general introduction, what's going on in Germany at the moment and about the election campaign. And I think I do that in 4 points. So my first point is that this election in Germany compared to the election in France, the Netherlands, but also in Austria is kind of a boring election. It's not an election that decides the destiny of Europe. We don't have, as Pilar already mentioned, Marine Le Pen or somebody else waiting, but we have 2 pro-European candidates. We don't have a polarized situation as in France and Austria. The country is politically relatively stable. We have a center or a middle that holds. 80% of the political parties are part of this broad, especially European and foreign policy consensus. also of the next Bundestag. So we have 80% kind of middle ground and 20% at the margins, at the very right and the very left at the political spectrum. And only two parties which are going to be part of the next Bundestag are at the very, very left, like Die Linke, and the very right, the Alternative für Deutschland, the AfD. So the situation is, as I said, not very polarized, especially when it comes to European integration questions. There is no question for most Germans. There is an extraordinary consensus that the European integration process is something good, something that we need to continue, that Germany is anchored in the EU, and that is totally without any question. So this is also true when it comes to Merkel's refugee policy, although the public support might not be equally 80% of the population, but the political parties of this Bundestag and also the opposition kind of backed Merkel's refugee policy. The general orientation of Germany is and will remain pro-European, pro-liberal international order, pro-Western, pro-globalization. And we talk about different shades of gray here and not about black and white like in the French election. And I'm not talking about the AfD and Die Linke at the moment, but about this 80% in the center. So, and because over the last couple of months, some very important questions like same-sex marriage or kind of the use of nuclear power, these questions were answered, so there is no big obstacle that prevents a coalition within this 80% center spectrum. So it is theoretically possible that we have another grand coalition, SPD and CDU. It is maybe possible to have a CDU-FDP coalition. It is also possible that we have for the first time a three, or if you count the CSU, even a four-party coalition like CDU, CSU, the Greens and the FDP. And I don't think it's possible, but it's thinkable to have a black and green coalition. So there are no major obstacles. The SPD kind of said same-sex marriage is a precondition for us, but now that question is solved, there are no major obstacles. So this is the first thing. German election, boring, 80% consensus, especially on European and foreign policy. Second point, if you have a closer look at what's going on in Germany, there is polarization. And that is interesting because it's a polarization. The country is polarized between East and West still, even so many years after German unification. The states of the former East are much more they are, let's say, to a much larger extent open to vote for the parties at the political very left or political very right. So they over-represent this 20%. I give you an example. There's a state election in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, a state in the east. The AfD had reached the second place with 20.8%. And in another state called Sachsen-Anhalt, the AfD was the second largest party, was 24.3%. So, and there it was even the question whether they would be the strongest party in the state. So, and Berlin is a divided city. I live in a divided city in the former East. People vote for AfD and Die Linke. In the former West, they vote for CDU and SPD. And in the middle, they vote where the globalized English-speaking hipsters live. They vote for the Green Party. So. In the East, there seems to be a tendency to go for the extremes, and we have to find explanations for that. So AfD this time, and this is kind of the big news for Germany, is a right-wing political party. It became more and more a right-wing political party over the last years. It was founded in 2013, and it began as an anti-Euro party, but now it's also an anti-migration, anti-Islam, anti-establishment, anti-globalization, and back to the 50s party. And so they have a chance, according to some polls, to get 12% of the votes. Personally, I think chances are there that they get even 15% of the votes, but that is highly disputed in Germany. Some say they won't get more than 10%, but I think they will be in double digits, and they might be even the third largest party in the German parliament. And that is a first for the German political system, and it is a significant change, I would say, especially because the AfD kind of radicalized over the last years. So recent remarks from the people at the top of the AfD about Germany, about the German soldiers during the Second World War, the Holocaust Memorial in Berlin, all were very extreme, they were very critical, and they indicated that it's not just the anti-EU, anti-establishment party anymore, but they are a right-wing party bordering sometimes to the very right spectrum. So that was my second point. Third point is very quick. So when it comes to topics, although AfD only might get about 12%, or between 8 and maybe 15%, AfD manages very well to set the agenda in this election campaign. That is totally out of proportion. During the big campaign between Merkel and Schulz, they talked a lot about Turkey and Erdogan, about immigration and domestic security. They didn't talk about education, about unemployment, I don't know, the environment, all that. So AfD sets a lot of topics in this election campaign, but this election campaign, as I said in the beginning, is otherwise pretty boring. One of the main issues was hipsters in Berlin speaking English and not German anymore, so the big issues were kind of absent from this campaign. The SPD tried anti-Trump, defense spending, appeasement with Russia. I think you will cover all that, Uli. They tried social justice, they tried unemployment, all that. That was not a big issue in this election campaign. So, and fourth point is that this is not an election about change, and this is also different to all the other elections in France and the Netherlands. So it seems as if the Germans don't want change, but continuity. They want more of the same. They want just more Merkel, and maybe even they don't want to change their lifestyle. They are by and large pretty pleased with the political situation, and that is pretty astonishing because in the end of 2016, as I was mentioning when I talked about the state elections, the climate in the country was different. So we had a climate of change. People were not satisfied with Angela Merkel's refugee policy. She was increasingly weakened within her own political party, so in the beginning of the year, we had also Martin Schulz. When he was kind of nominated, there was a movement against Angela Merkel, but that silenced completely. And my last sentence, it's silenced completely without Angela Merkel changing her rhetoric, her campaign style, anything. It was just because of, I think, the other events, Trump and Brexit and all that the Germans decided we stick to Angela Merkel, that's better than any alternative.
Okay, thank you, Jana. Dankeschön. Fabian, Sie sind dran.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me. Brussels is equally dark and autumny as Berlin, so it is nice to be in the sun. I will be focusing a bit on the economics behind the election, but I have to say it's equally boring. There are very few things which distinguish the mainstream parties, and economic preferences are broadly speaking the same. They differ in degree, but not really in any kind of principle. I think what we also have to note is that it's extremely difficult to distinguish between the European and the domestic issues. When it comes to economic policy, there is always the crossover into the European debate, although within Germany, that crossover isn't made in the discussion. So very often you have the discussions about economic policy which do not make reference to the European level, although whatever can be done is very much determined by the European level. So I think what we have is a very broad consensus. The broad consensus is that the overall situation is rather good for Germany. Germans are always a bit pessimistic about the future, so you will always get people saying, yes, but tomorrow it might be worse. So one of the things which dominates German thinking is always security. It's always, we have to be stable, we have to make sure that there are not too big changes, and that also means we have to not accumulate as much debt. At least that's the rhetoric. When you look at some of the figures during different times, Germany has also run large deficits and accumulated debt. But at the moment, because the economic position is so benign, we have record low unemployment. We have every single time there is a new estimate for tax take, it goes up. So for the government, it is rather easy at the moment to maintain a balanced budget, which is also the goal, certainly, of Schäuble, but also more generally, it is something which is quite broadly shared. So the idea that you would, for example, borrow to finance large-scale infrastructure, which in my perspective makes a lot of sense in an economic environment where interest rates are at a record low, but that is something which in Germany is politically not seen as positive. What is also a broad consensus is that inflation has to be kept low, that a strong currency is a good thing, and that there is a concern both in terms of the actions of the European Central Bank, in terms of financing what is seen as finance debt in other countries, but also in terms of the interest rate policy. Germany is still a country of savers. So the savers are feeling that at the moment they are being disadvantaged by monetary policy. What is also not in dispute is the export orientation of the German economy. Everything is seen through that export focus. So whatever threatens competitiveness of German industry has to be addressed. And that drives a lot of policy in all the big parties. So what could we expect? Well, unless there is a collapse in economic performance, which looks very unlikely, I think if this benign environment continues, all of the things I've just mentioned will also influence the next government, whatever coalition it is going to be. That coalition will probably do a bit more spending. I think the fiscal situation allows that, so it will not be dramatic, but there's a recognition that there is a need for more infrastructure spending, particularly in Germany. There's an obsession with the road infrastructure, particularly in West Germany, which is seen as not having had the investment which the East has had, so there will be some rebalancing there. On top of that, I think the Länder will get more money, so they will have to be taking into account that the Länder will increasingly start getting squeezed because there's a debt break on what the lenders are going to be able to borrow in future. So they will need more money also because there are no more pressures on issues like migration. So that already is in the pipeline, that there will be more transfer to that level. I would think that we will also see an increase in security and defense spending, although it's not going to be as dramatic as maybe some people across the Atlantic would hope. But I think certainly there's pressure there. There's always pressure in Germany to increase pensions. The pension lobby is extremely strong. So again, this is something of a consensus. And what I would expect, probably one area where it will be interesting to see in what direction the new government takes it is industrial policy. And particularly following on from the diesel scandal, the question of how you turn the German car industry into something which is much more ready to deal with a decarbonized future, with a greener future, more competitive. will take quite a lot of effort, and there's now, I think, the recognition that this will have to happen. There are a number of other things which could happen depending on the coalition, and I think it's very difficult to see too many different coalitions given the voting arithmetic. But I think if it is a more left-leaning coalition, we will have pressure on dealing with inequalities more pressure on issues such as childcare, such as integration of migrants. There's also a debate in Germany around rent levels. How can you control how much people pay for rent? That's seen very much as addressing the concerns of the center of the German population, because most Germans don't own but rent. So I think if it's on the left, there will be pressure on these issues. The more right liberal coalition would look for issues such as tax cuts. Probably both sides could look into education, although education is a very difficult topic in Germany because it is actually down to the Länder level, so it's very, very hard to change. If you want to change something fundamental, you're talking about constitutional change, so this is a very high hurdle. So overall, but none of the things I've just mentioned are really red lines. They're not things which will make or break coalitions. They will be a compromise between the different parties within those coalitions. So again, it is quite boring. There will be a consensus coalition contract which will pick up some of these issues, and there will be a little bit of movement, but probably not a lot of dramatic change. I think the only dramatic change in the economy area is, in my view, who the finance minister is going to be. I think that is probably the biggest possible change. Schäuble has said he wants to go again. That makes it very hard to dislodge him because he's also very popular in the population, maybe more popular than with Merkel.
Yeah.
But the FDP has already said that if they go into coalition, they would like the finance ministry. I think there are considerations within the SPD as well about whether the finance ministry is not the more important post than the foreign ministry. So there are some moves there, but given the strength of the CDU at the moment, I would expect that after this election, the chancellor will still be called Merkel and the finance minister will still be called Schäuble.
Okay, thank you, Fabian. Muchas gracias. Ulrich, this is your turn.
So I will cover the foreign policy aspect of the German election, and I have to say it's equally boring, but you expect this already. For one reason is if we look at what's going to happen after the elections, my predecessor said it already, Merkel is going to be chancellor for her fourth term, 16 years, and foreign policy is very much run by the chancellery. Maybe more than ever, there is a drive towards the executive. The foreign ministry has lost some of its role, also with changes inside the EU. The head of the executive is just sitting on all the important tables, while the foreign minister has less of a role. And so let's expect continuity on foreign policy because of Merkel. That's the number one. Number two is foreign policy didn't figure really in this election. There are some controversial issues, but it looks almost as if there's an all-party consensus to keep them on a lower level. So one is, of course, Russia, sanctions, Ukraine, and the other is Turkey. But Merkel has managed very early on to build a consensus position around these issues so that she is almost not vulnerable. The one thing that might had happened was that SPD would try to paint Merkel as Trump's poodle and accuse her of not talking enough to Putin, of being imbalanced. That might have been a strategy, but Schulz didn't go down that road. And Merkel covered herself pretty well. I mean, half a year ago, she emerged as the leader of the free world against Trump without really doing very much to earn this role. But that's the one thing. The other is there is already some kind on Russia, some kind of compromise between Merkel and SPD. Merkel has agreed to the second Nord Stream pipeline. So there is kind of peace between SPD and CDU on that. The election, the debates didn't go very deep. So we talked a lot about diesel, whether the diesel should run out in 2025 or 2030. So the discussions were very focused on certain topics, not on the wider questions of digital future, the future of mobility. These bigger issues almost didn't come up during the campaign. Merkel said that after her public debate with Schulz, she said, well, we didn't talk about digitalization. We should have done so, but it didn't play a big role. Okay, but there are still shades of gray, and the coalition partner matters to a certain extent. So I'm going to look into what the different potential coalition partners, they all form part of this 80% center, what their foreign policy views might be in coalition negotiations. So SPD, we know SPD is in government right now. It's the Grand Coalition. Gabriel, the current foreign minister, has pushed for reaching out more to Moscow. He has talking about easing sanctions in return for some movement in Ukraine, removal of heavy weapons. So this is a very low bar, and this is certainly not the position the Chancellor Merkel has. She is continues to think that there needs to be a full fulfillment of the whole Minsk agreement before sanctions can be removed. So there is some kind of disagreement, but it's not so much SPD. Gabriel is very much the person who is driving this. Schulz didn't really pick it up during the campaign. The next foreign minister might well be Gabriel, the current one, or it might be Schulz. If it's Gabriel, we'll see him continue to push to reach out more to Russia, or to be more open to compromise. If it's Schulz, I would guess that he would be very much in line with Merkel on that, more than Gabriel is, more like Steinmeier was in the past. SPD, of course, would they are at least rhetorically very pro-EU. They want to be seen as the #1 pro-EU party in Germany, and there would be, if SPD would be the coalition partner, if it would be a new grand coalition, there would be probably more room for this grand bargain between Merkel and Macron that everybody's expecting. So SPD would be the party most in favor, together with the Greens. The Greens are also very pro-EU, and SPD and Greens both recognize the need that there needs to be some probably permanent transfer. But Fabian is in the middle of these discussions. I guess he will talk a little bit about this as well. So from the Greens, we could expect a very pro-EU, open to more transfer union position. On Russia, the Greens have been with Merkel, very much so. And Özdemir, one of the two current leading candidates, is in his public remarks very much in line with the current Russia policy. But we have to recognize that this has been very much driven by Marie-Louise Beck, who is a MP, and she will not run again. She's probably the leading expert in Bundestag on Eastern Europe, Russia, and together with her husband, who has been head of the Böll Stiftung. Ralf Fuchs, they have really done a lot to raise awareness in favor of Ukraine in Germany. And we have to see where the Greens are moving on foreign policy. It's not a done deal. With Özdemir is continuity, but there's also a rather leftist base that may not be so ready to keep on, to stay on this track. Then there's FDP with Lindner, which is also a surprise in this elections circle. Like AFD, they are probably going to double-digit numbers, and they have a very talented leader, Lindner, who is a kind of centrist populist, so he's picking up the topics that people want to talk about. He talked about the refugees and the need to limit their stay. He also talked about reaching out more to Russia, accepting the annexation of Crimea, of somehow freezing this, taking it off the agenda. So he giving signs in every direction. But what FDP would actually do in coalition negotiations, it's, to me, very unclear where they have their red lines. Certainly on the euro, this is probably the only one red line FDP has, where FDP in the past was in big trouble over Greece, over the whole idea of transfer union, and part of the FDP clientele went over to AfD. So I think this is the only international issue. I would agree with Fabian, this is almost domestic because the euro is domestic and international as well, but here is something, it's a sticking point, a potential sticking point for the coalition negotiations, because Lindner needs to deliver to his constituency. He has said no transfer union. So we have, on the one hand, we have Macron saying we need a kind of a big budget, a serious budget that would really affect the way the euro is managed. And on the other hand, we have Lindner who said no transfer union. So in coalition negotiations, Merkel would be, really probably have a difficult time to figure out how to balance between those two dynamics. So otherwise, but broadly speaking, continuity. The chancellor is the chancellery is the place where foreign policy is cooked in Germany, and this will continue. And we know Merkel since 12 years, so she will continue along the lines that are well known. Thank you.
Gracias, Ulrich. Thank you. Vielen Dank, Miguel.
Muchas gracias, Pilar. Bueno, hace 4 años o 5 años se decía que había que esperar a las elecciones alemanas para progresar en la integración económica, fiscal, política de Europa. Me acuerdo bien, en los años 2012, 2013, todo el mundo estaba pendiente de las elecciones alemanas. Pasaron 4 años y pocos avances se han conseguido, ¿no? Ahora parece que con la llegada de Macron sí que puede haber avances después de las elecciones alemanas, pero lo que se ha visto es que en principio el debate europeo no ha estado en la campaña. Y eso en principio también es preocupante, y eso también es una de las razones por qué ha sido más aburrida esta campaña. Yo creo que la victoria de Macron ha despertado bastante escepticismo, miedo, cautela. Bueno, el alemán ahora creo que en general está un poco en guardia porque ve que Francia viene con grandes visiones de futuro, y eso al alemán, sobre todo en relación al tema de una unión de transferencias o una posible unión de transferencias o un posible presupuesto para la zona euro, bueno, pues crea bastante alergia, ¿no? Un par de puntos que creo que son reseñables desde el punto de vista español y desde el punto de vista de un analista que está en Madrid mirando hacia Alemania, ¿no? El primero creo que es que hay que destacar que de todas las economías, grandes economías del G7, Alemania ha sido la que mejor ha salido de la crisis, sin ninguna duda, ¿no? Lo vemos, yo creo que la polarización de Estados Unidos demuestra los problemas estructurales que tiene Estados Unidos. La victoria de Trump es un reflejo de ellos. Vemos el debate existencial que hay en el Reino Unido con Brexit y cómo está ahora mismo el país. Francia ha estado ausente. Muchos pedíamos que volviese otra vez Francia al debate europeo por también, ¿no?, su poca ambición de reforma y por lo tanto sufriendo una crisis también, con un desempleo que pasa del 10 llegó al 12%. Y después, claro, Japón y Italia están en esclerosis crónica y bueno, a lo mejor el único que puede competir con los alemanes es Canadá, pero Canadá es un país más pequeño, menos influyente, no como Alemania, que está en el centro ahora mismo del proyecto de integración europea, ¿no? Y está en el centro y los alemanes son cada vez más centralistas o les gusta el centro, ¿no? Pero también por la condición económica en la que están, ¿no? Hace poco Der Spiegel presentaba unas encuestas que realmente llaman la atención, ¿no? El 93% de los alemanes están felices con su vida, el 93%. El 90% dice que la situación económica del país es buena. El 84% dice que su situación financiera es buena o muy buena. El 72% está feliz en su trabajo, dice que tiene un buen trabajo. 72%. El 73% dice que está contento con los servicios públicos del país. O sea, claro, estos son niveles de acomodamiento que reflejan también que, bueno, podemos decir que si el trabajo es muy importante para el alemán, pues el 72% dice que tiene un buen trabajo y el 28% dice que no. Y entonces hay un problema porque el 28% de los alemanes dicen que no les gusta su trabajo y eso para una cultura alemana es problemático y a lo mejor indica que son también la base, el caudal de los votos para los partidos más en la parte más radical, ¿no?, del ámbito político, ¿no?, tanto la izquierda como la derecha, ¿no? También es verdad, y eso lo comentaba un poco Fabian, que el 30% de los alemanes, pese a esto, el 30% dice que el rumbo que lleva el país es mal, que el país va en una dirección errónea. Bueno, yo creo que también eso refleja un poco de que también hay ese sentimiento de que ahora sí que nos va bien, pero no sabemos cómo nos va a ir mañana y hace mucho tiempo que nos han hecho reformas en el país y eso es un mensaje que está calando. Y después está todo el tema este de la deuda, ¿no? Yo creo que también dentro del debate europeo Alemania creo que se ha tomado, sobre todo el gobierno alemán ahora mismo, se ha tomado como meta que hay que bajar hasta los 60% en la deuda pública, porque eso es lo que dice Maastricht y ese es el baremo al que hay que llegar y tenemos que dar ejemplo. Por lo tanto, vamos con la Schwarze Null, con el presupuesto equilibrado, llegar a eso cuanto antes y se están acercando. Por lo tanto, en ese sentido, tenemos una Alemania que el 80% de los alemanes dicen que son ideológicamente de centro, que es un poco lo que comentaba Jana, ¿no?, que es ese centro del 80%, y eso lo ha sabido explotar Merkel de una manera increíble, ¿no? Se ha plantado en el centro. Muchos dicen que para qué hay que votar a la SPD si hay políticas de que las hace Merkel, ¿no? Pensemos en el salario mínimo, pensemos en abrir las puertas cuando llegó la avalancha de los refugiados, pensemos en el desactivar la energía nuclear, pensemos en llegar a decir que el Islam forma parte de la Alemania moderna, ¿no?, forma parte del país. Eso, claro, lógicamente hace que mucha de los votantes más conservadores, más retrógradas, hayan escapado. O sea, que el coste para Merkel ha estado ahí, en liberar ese flanco y dejar que ese voto fuese tanto al FDP o a Alternative für Deutschland, Alternativa por Alemania, pero bueno, ella se está sentada ahí en el centro y va a ganar sus cuartas elecciones, que la pone a la par de su padrino, ¿no?, político, Helmut Kohl, ¿no?, que son palabras mayores. O sea, esta, ¿no?, es la política que puede llegar a un nivel tal del gigante Helmut Kohl, tanto en política doméstica como europea, ¿no? Ha utilizado lo que se llama una desmovilización pasiva de sus rivales, ha desmovilizado a sus rivales, no ha entrado en los temas conflictivos. Europa podría ser uno, por lo tanto no ha entrado en él. Refugiados, ha intentado evitar todos los problemas, los temas conflictivos, y Trump ha sido pues una bendición para la CDU, ¿no? Salía también la prensa alemana el otro día, ¿no? que debería mandarles cartas todas las semanas los de la CDU a Trump, agradeciéndole lo que está haciendo allí, porque frente a un presidente de Estados Unidos temerario, pues desde una cultura alemana lo que haces es agarrarte al capitán que tienes, ¿no? No vamos a cambiar de capitán en plena tempestad, ¿no? Entonces, claro, eso le ha ayudado mucho a Merkel. ¿Qué significa todo esto para el resto de Europa? Creo que la visión general, el consenso de los analistas es para Europa sería mejor una coalición con la SPD, porque el SPD, los socialistas son más europeístas, pueden también dialogar mejor con Macron. Macron se ha acercado mucho a la SPD en los últimos años, o sea que podemos avanzar más desde un punto de vista español, que España está a favor de mayor integración, a favor de una unión fiscal, a favor de un presupuesto de la zona euro, a favor de mayor democratización del proceso de decisión de la zona euro, etcétera. Pues ahí se ve como, bueno, mejor la SPD que los liberales del FDP, por lo que han explicado mis colegas. Pero bueno, voy a ir un poco en contracorriente y pienso, si algún día en Alemania hay un consenso para entrar y dar pasos a la unión de transferencias, ¿quién lo tiene que hacer? ¿La SPD o el FDP? Bueno, sabemos que en temas de, por ejemplo, de política laboral, ¿no?, de reformas laborales, siempre se dice, y Alemania es un ejemplo, que tienen que ser los socialistas los que tienen que hacer las reformas laborales, la flexibilización del mercado laboral, porque, bueno, tienen el apoyo de los sindicatos, etcétera. Entonces, siempre al final le toca a los socialistas hacer las reformas laborales. Schröder, un ejemplo, en Alemania, Macron, podemos debatir si Macron es realmente socialista o no, pero Macron ahora en Francia. A lo mejor la única manera para conseguir un consenso en Alemania es que el FDP, sé que esto es problemático y que poca gente lo ve, pero a ver, Lindner tampoco ha dicho que él se opone tajantemente a una cosa como un fondo de inversión europea. Yo creo que puede haber ahí también, ¿no?, un balance. La CDU puede decirle al FDP, en temas europeos nos acercamos más. Vuelvo a la idea de que Merkel, este va a ser el último mandato de Merkel. Si quiere dejar un legado en Europa, este es el momento de dejarlo, ¿no? El legado del euro, construir la unión fiscal que necesita el euro, porque, vamos a ser sinceros, Europa ahora mismo no es un tema en Alemania, y en Alemania mucha gente se pregunta, pero ¿para qué hacen tanto ruido los franceses? ¿Por qué quieren un presupuesto de la zona euro? ¿Por qué se necesitan más reformas? Si la crisis ha pasado, si Grecia ya está creciendo, si España está creciendo al 3%, si incluso Italia está creciendo. Por lo tanto, ¿por qué tanto deseo de reformar, ¿no? Claro, tenemos que decir la verdad, ¿no? Ahora mismo tenemos esta calma en gran parte por el Banco Central Europeo. El Banco Central Europeo desde el 2012 está manteniendo a los mercados tranquilos, está metiendo, además ahora con la expansión cuantitativa, está metiendo 60.000 millones al mes en los mercados financieros. Lógico que no haya problemas en las primas de riesgo, ¿no? Pero claro, la clase política alemana ha delegado la gestión de la crisis al Banco Central Europeo. O sea, un país que siempre ha dicho que es problemático que el Banco Central se politice, que entre en política, cuando había que hacer política, ha decidido que el que tenga que resolver la crisis y haga política sea el Banco Central Europeo. Entonces, claro, si Draghi para de hacer esto, pues lógicamente puede haber otra crisis y ahí el panorama va a cambiar mucho. Y a lo mejor incluso la FDP decide que hay que avanzar en la unión fiscal y política. Finalmente, no sé qué piensan mis colegas, pero ¿cuál es la posibilidad de que a lo mejor Merkel gobierne en minoría? Desde su centro, desde el pivote del centro, repartiendo balones a izquierda y derecha, sabiendo que SPD no quiere volver a una coalición, una gran coalición, porque están muy quemados. El FDP casi desaparece la última vez que entró en coalición con la CDU. La coalición jamaica de 3 partidos nunca ha existido. Tampoco nunca ha existido un gobierno minoría, pero si alguien lo puede hacer, quizás sea Merkel desde el centro y repartiendo balones.
Gracias, Miguel. Vamos a entrar ahora en el turno de preguntas que me corresponden a mí. Bueno, si hay algo en lo que han coincidido los cuatro intervinientes es que la campaña electoral alemana es aburrida. Creo que eso ha quedado claro. Todos han destacado lo mismo. No sé si ha sido y está siendo más aburrida que en otras ocasiones. Quien ha seguido campañas electorales en Alemania siempre nos hemos quejado de lo mismo, que les faltaba alegría y que les faltaba pasión, aunque a veces también demasiada alegría y demasiada pasión tampoco es bueno cuando se trata del futuro de todos los ciudadanos. En cualquier caso, sí que hemos esbozado ya algunas de las cuestiones importantes que se debaten en estas elecciones y también sobre las consecuencias que puede tener, pero creo que estamos pasando un poco por alto. No es algo que haría, sin embargo, en los medios de comunicación, que me parece que le están dando, sin embargo, prestando demasiada atención, pero sí que creo que se debe analizar la inevitable entrada de la extrema derecha de la Alternativa para Alemania en el Parlamento. Es verdad que no va a ser o parece que no va a ser con lo que nos temíamos hace varios meses, que podía ser un 15%, pero ya estamos hablando de un 10-11% en las últimas encuestas, lo cual tampoco es bueno, porque pensábamos que iba a quedarse en un 7 y un 8, pero en cualquier caso puede entrar como tercera fuerza política, y todo lo que eso significa, de presencia en comisiones, de presencia en las instituciones. Lo que me gustaría preguntarle a todos es qué puede significar y cómo puede influir la alternativa para Alemania, la presencia de la alternativa para Alemania en la política alemana. Podemos empezar con Jana.
Maybe I just start. As I said already in the beginning, I think the influence of the AfD is bigger than the 12% or the 8 to 12% they get, because they were able in the past to set the agenda. It is like the rabbit in front of the snake, and in Germany it feels as if the political establishment is the rabbit sitting in front of the snake, the AfD, and because in the German political system, this is a first. I mean, we had right-wing parties before, but they disappeared immediately. They always had about, they never, or they hardly ever entered a state, a government or a national, or a state parliament or a national parliament. So this is the first, and I think that parties still try to figure out where their voters come from, why people are voting for AfD, and all that. So I think that AfD is able to, or was able to set the agenda to a much larger extent than the 12% they represent. Then the mainstream parties talk about AfD topics, and we saw that already also in the Netherlands, the same phenomena. And also I think maybe you don't agree with me, but I think also the FDP kind of try to compete for the same voters with the AfD. So the political system is partly driven by the AfD, like the rabbit and the snake.
Gracias, Jana. Ulrich,
Yes,
tú pedías.
AfD first came up as an anti-Euro party because the two most controversial things Merkel did was save Greece and let refugees in. Her Russia policy could have been more controversial, but she managed to wrap it into a mix of diplomacy and sanctions, so it doesn't look so controversial, and people don't really feel affected. But they feel affected by the euro, they feel affected by refugees, people coming in their country. So first, AfD grew as an anti-euro party, with very bourgeois groups of lawyers, business people who were just saying, no, we didn't sign up to this contract. We didn't sign up to a transfer union. We didn't sign up for paying debt for the South. No way. So this is where AfD emerged, because FDP refused to play that role. And FDP, the Liberal Party, almost split over the issue. So then we saw AfD completely changing into an anti-refugee party. in a way, this is the party that picks up the protest vote on the issues that are most controversial in Germany. That is one point. So we may think that this may also disappear depending on the future of the refugee question, how this is going to be handled. Will they be able to close the Mediterranean route? Will
But Uli,
Turkey
it's not about refugees anymore. It's about migration, and it's about Islam mostly. It's not, they transferred it. It's not only about refugees coming in, now it's about Muslims living in Germany.
Yes, my point is that it's too early to judge whether we see emerging a real right-wing party, such as we see in France. It's possible that they emerge into a stable milieu with their own media, with their own party organization, but at the moment they are very much anti still. So it's a strong protest move. They may merge into something else, but I think it's too early to say whether this is going to be a lasting party. You could argue in favor of this because Merkel moved into the center, and in a way the right-wing nationalist, xenophobic thought is left without home, and so AfD could pick it up. So it could be that Germany develops a real right-wing party, and this would actually be kind of European normalization, I have to say. Not in Spain, but in most European countries we have this.
¿Queréis añadir algo por este lado?
Yo simplemente, yo creo que está dentro del el tema que hemos comentado ya aquí en esta fundación, el eje entre cosmopolitanismo y nativismo, ¿no? Yo creo que con el impacto de las nuevas tecnologías, con la desigualdad que también la vemos en Alemania, con la gente que cabalga la ola de la globalización y los que son los perdedores, y no solamente está el eje este más marxista, más materialista, más económico, pero incluso también el tema identitario, que también hay gente que, por eso la FDP, ¿no? Que la FDP en principio es un partido liberal que bebe de muchos profesionales liberales, gente que gana bien, pero que tiene una identidad, tiene una preocupación por la identidad alemana, por el impacto de la inmigración, por la islamización de la sociedad. Entonces, bueno, hay ahí, ¿no?, un eje que tenemos en todos los países occidentales, aquellos que están más, cómodos con una sociedad más libre, libertaria, liberal, cosmopolita, y aquellos que ven que tanto su empleo, por un lado, o incluso la identidad de su comunidad están amenazadas, ¿no?
Do you want to add something?
Yeah, just briefly. I think it's important to divide the two issues. One is the polarization which we have in Germany as we have it in many other societies, and which parties will actually benefit from that in the end. And that I think we cannot say at the moment. The polarization is certainly there, but when you look at the AfD is also following what, in my view, happens almost inevitably with these kind of parties. These extremist parties have a lot of very strong characters who don't believe in party discipline, who have, in the vast majority of cases, said things in public in the past which they shouldn't have said. Some of them have a criminal background. I mean, if you actually go into the detail of that, and that tends to get exposed once they get into positions of power, like into the parliament, then that doesn't look particularly good. So for the AfD at the moment, if it wasn't for the refugee crisis, I think the AfD would have disappeared, because in German public opinion, the Euro crisis had gone. It was no longer in the debate, so an anti-Euro party was no longer a proposition. And actually this is something which I also expect to continue. The European issue has completely disappeared. So the anti-Euro line also for the FDP is not going to be a great vote winner, because there are not that many people anymore who care about this issue at this moment. So unless we get a new Euro crisis, I think this is going to be a relatively marginal issue. But The issue of identity of refugees will still be there. I would suspect that if we are not going to see a re-emergence of acute crisis, then yes, they will have a certain potential they can draw from, but they are not going to grow anymore. So they will become increasingly a marginalized part of the political system. If we have big numbers coming back in, I think it would be a problem. The other point which I think makes this a little bit more interesting than we have said up to now is not what happens on Sunday, but actually what happens in 2 or 3 years' time when Merkel decides to go. Because this is the one issue which we know is going to come at some point. We know that she's going to be very aware that what happens to leaders which stay too long, they get stabbed in the back. She knows that because she's done it. So I think we are going to see an exit which is very much managed by her. But that, when it happens, leaves a big hole on the CDU side, a big hole both in terms of personality, but also in terms of policy. What direction will the CDU go? Will it still be in this natural center where it likes to be? For Merkel, the Grand Coalition is ideal. For Merkel, the Grand Coalition means she sits between the right wing of her party and the Bavarian sister party, the CSU, and on the one hand, and on the SPD on the other hand, so she can always be in the middle with the consensus she wants. The FDP would not be a natural ally for Merkel. But once she goes, all of that is open.
Okay. Gracias a los cuatro.
I think this is really, I think the cards will be mixed totally after she's gone. So the next election will be really interesting.
Don't
whether
worry anymore.
whether
No?
CDU can produce a figure that integrates the whole spectrum like her, I doubt it. And whether SPD is ready to produce someone who could really pick up her position, because the German system now has really changed from, we had a system where we had a center-left party, CDU, center-left but SPD, and center-right party, CDU, and FDP in the middle. This was the old Bundesrepublik. And now we have a huge center where everybody moves a little bit around, but the Greens are in, FDP is in, CDU, CSU, SPD, and this is kind of, and then we have the extremes. It's a new arrangement of the political scene, and whether this is going to survive Merkel is a big question, or whether this implodes the system she has built in her then 16 or 15 years, and we may see something, a new energy coming up, and everything can happen then.
Gracias. También sobre más política interna y también otro elemento que creo que hay que tener en cuenta, incluso de cara al futuro, es el tema socialdemocracia alemana, el SPD. Después del efecto Schulz, la idea de que el SPD iba incluso a ganar a la CDU, hemos tenido justamente lo contrario, una caída, y últimamente parece ser que, si las encuestas no se equivocan, es una caída en picado. Podríamos incluso tener el peor resultado de la historia del SPD y rondar el 20%, 21%. No es lo mismo que les ha ocurrido a los socialdemócratas franceses y a los holandeses, pero sí que podemos estar encaminándonos hacia un problema que sería un SPD todavía más debilitado de lo que es en este momento. No sabemos si solo es producto de que Merkel fagocita a todo el que se acerca a ella, o es también un producto de la normalización, entre comillas, de la política alemana. ¿Qué podría pasar en el futuro si realmente vemos un SPD tan debilitado como en torno a un 20-21% si las encuestas de los últimos días no se equivocan? Bueno, primero hablo esta banda porque son siempre los primeros que hablan más sobre política interior alemana.
You already see that at the state level. The SPD in recent state elections was very weak. SPD was already, I think I have to look that up, but I think in Mecklenburg, in Sachsen-Anhalt, they got 10.6% of the votes. So you see something at the state level, which we might see at the national level, that you have fragmentation of the political system, as Ulrich said. Now with the AfD in, we have already 6 or 7 parties, depends how you count CDU, CSU. If you count them separately, we have 7 parties, and they all, if the CDU gets 38 and the SPD gets 20, all the others compete about in the margins between 8 and 15%, and that makes coalition building increasingly difficult. But the problem is that Merkel, in this election campaign, she stole basically all the big topics from the SPD. Like when they tried to attack her with Trump or being Trump's poodle, Gabriel did that several times, Schulz tried that too in the beginning and tried to portray Merkel as a Trump poodle and a person who wanted to kind of overblow German military. She gave that beer tent speech. And on like gay marriage, she kind of said, okay, we're gonna have an election about this. And she covered she also stole everything from the Green Party, which is going to suffer very much as well. They are very low in the polls at the moment because she covers all the environment and climate protection and all that. So she is very good in stealing topics from the other parties without actually delivering good solutions, I have to say.
The idea that some have in Germany is that SPD should be at the center of a left-wing coalition. The editor of Die Zeit, for example, wrote a long article about this, the dream of SPD with the Greens and Linkspartei. So somehow they wanted to move the Linkspartei into a coalition partner, but it's very difficult because the Linkspartei has it has been built on the remains of the former governing party in German Democratic Republic, and this is just hard to on foreign policy especially. So they call for Germany should leave NATO, and they have really hard line for policy positions that is not compatible with Western German mindset. So I think they need to give up this dream, and elections are being won in Germany at the center, as long as the economy is prosperous as it is. You know, if there's something happening in China, we don't know. But if we assume that the prosperity is okay, is moving ahead as it is, I think the next chancellor needs to somehow copy the Merkel position and try to keep this broad center together.
¿Por este lado queréis añadir algo más o pasamos?
Un par de cosillas. Yo creo que si aceptamos que estamos viviendo una revolución digital, y yo pienso que estamos viviendo una revolución digital, para mí la mayor víctima de la revolución digital, así como los partidos socialistas, obreros, surgieron con la revolución industrial, como respuesta a la revolución industrial, a finales del siglo XIX, principios del siglo XX, son la mayor víctima de la revolución digital. La realidad es que muy poca gente tiene un sentido obrero ya. Entonces, claro, se reduce enormemente la población que tiene ese punto de vista. Entonces, creo que en esa realidad van a sufrir mucho los partidos socialistas obreros. Eso no quiere decir que no haya gente antisistema, que no haya gente desamparada, que no haya gente que quiera respuestas, pero los partidos socialistas por ahora no están dando esas respuestas. Y esas respuestas, pues en su momento fueron un poco los verdes. Die Linke se mantiene porque, bueno, todavía hay esa visión más anticapitalista que se mantiene ahí, ¿no? Pero es muy residual. Y después los partidos nuevos. También yo estuve mirando, para preparar el debate, estuve mirando qué votan los jóvenes alemanes entre 16 y 18 años, que no pueden votar. Y veo que, por ejemplo, el Partido de los Piratas, un partido de la revolución digital, tiene muchísimo apoyo. Entonces vemos ahí que incluso, ¿no?, en los más jóvenes, pues también, ¿no?, son nuevos partidos con nuevas agendas, con nuevos programas, con nuevas causas, los que se llevan el voto de los jóvenes más políticamente activos, que normalmente eran los más asiduos a entrar en partidos ¿no?, socialistas o obreros en el pasado.
Gracias. Voy a... sorry, I didn't know if you wanted to add something.
No, just a very quick point. I mean, I think it is certainly true that left-wing parties across Europe are struggling with a loss of part of their electorate. In particular, the people who feel disadvantaged and who feel threatened by migration, feel threatened by change. So there we can see that quite a large number have gone for the more extreme parties, sometimes on the left, sometimes on the right, depending on the country. But I think the German situation is peculiar because you have this centrist figure which has dominated politics for as long as anyone can remember. I mean, if you actually look at all the leaders Merkel has stood next to, and you see how many changes there have been, and she's still there and she's continuing to be there. So she has eliminated a lot of the competition, including within her own party. So it's not just that there are no leaders on the other side which are recognized, there are no leaders within the CDU which are recognized. So once she's gone, that does open up things a lot more. And I think that when you look at the Social Democrats in future, I'm not so sure it will just be a continuous downward trend. But they have also been caught by being in this coalition. So they have struggled, and you could see that in the debate between Schulz and Merkel. They have struggled to attack her very strongly because they have been in government. So it's very difficult to say everything she's done is wrong. She has also occupied the ground which they wanted to occupy. So it is extremely difficult. And this is, I think, the biggest uncertainty when it comes to the Social Democrats, is if they do as badly as some of the polls suggest. We need to see. I mean, we don't know yet because there is an extraordinary large amount of people who are still undecided. But if they do this badly, will they choose to go back into a coalition which they feel has pushed them into a corner and where they have been marginalized? Or will they choose to go into opposition to try to get a bigger profile, to try to actually have different policies in preparation for the time Merkel goes? But then there comes also the question of duty. And this is something which cannot be underestimated in Germany. Germans don't like instability, they don't like minority government. So the SPD would have to take a very brave stance to say we're not going to support a government if there's no alternative.
And the problem is that Merkel gets all the credit for the SPD topics, like Mindestlohn, like minimum wage, is something that is an SPD topic that was a success or was called a success of this government, but it's not credited to the SPD, but to Merkel. So she does not only steal all the topics, but she gets all the applause afterwards as well. So she's very good in doing this. Sorry, Uli.
Just briefly on SPD entering the next coalition. What I hear is that the leadership would love another grand coalition, because otherwise, if they fare very badly now, the Schulz and the Gabriels might be gone. So for them, it might be the only way ahead is to form another grand coalition. But it seems that the party itself is very much aware of this this problem of how do you get a profile in a coalition government with Merkel. So
Gracias. Voy a ir un poco más allá en el tema europeo. Miguel lo ha comentado, ha hecho ya alguna mención a ello, y todos estamos hablando ya un poco de post-Merkel. ¿Qué pasará cuando Merkel se vaya? Pero Merkel tiene, si las encuestas no se equivocan, una cuarta legislatura ante sí. No solo va a igualar a Kohl, sino que va a superar en el poder a Konrad Adenauer, al canciller de la posguerra alemana. Tanto Kohl como Adenauer han pasado a la historia con un legado por Europa, con un legado por hacer avanzar Europa. ¿Nos podemos esperar en este sentido una Merkel que nos sorprenda y que apueste por un avance, por una reforma que impulse definitivamente a la Unión Europea hacia adelante para dejar ese legado a nivel europeo y situarse en la estela de los dos grandes cancilleres cristianodemócratas, Adenauer y Kohl? ¿O nos vamos a presenciar una Merkel que va a intentar mantenerse un poco en la estabilidad, en la seguridad, pero no dar un paso adelante. Al fin y al cabo, no se va a volver a presentar, o todo parece indicar que no se va a volver a presentar, que esta vez el presentarse ha sido también una decisión personal relativamente dura y meditada, y no creemos que vaya a volverlo a hacer. Entonces, tiene que dejar un legado. Internamente, el legado puede ser los refugiados, viendo a ver qué ocurre también en el futuro con la integración de ese gran número de refugiados, si no hay muchas más sorpresas en ese sentido, pero hacia Europa, si quiere estar en la estela de Adenauer y Kohl, no le queda otra que hacer algo más.
I mean, she is not. Adenauer and Kohl were born and grew up close to the French border, so they were natural Europeans. And Helmut Kohl has remembered himself how they opened. They went to the border in the 50s and put down the border installments. So for him, and he grew up really in a French influenced region context, as well as Adenauer. His home city, Cologne, had been French during the Napoleon occupation until 1798 until 1815. So they have a long, and they had inherited the Roman law from the Napoleonic law. So there were deep connections, which Merkel is not part of that kind of. She's also not a natural CDU person, which has this legacy of the 1950s. How do you say Abendland in English? This kind of. This is Catholic culture, European. So there was a whole milieu where they emerged from, and Merkel is not part of that. She's not a hard European. She is a rational European. She has been convinced that this is the way to go. This is in Germany's interests, and there I think she is committed. She thinks that. But it's more related with globalization. It's not the traditional German-French friendship. It's not the war. It's globalization. You need big spaces to compete with the Chinese, with the Americans, and that's the only way ahead, because the European countries are too small to compete in a globalized world. So it's more a rational approach, and I don't think that she is a person. I don't see her as going beyond the management. To answer your question more concretely, I think managing the crisis for her is already a big achievement. So I don't think that she wants to do something on an architectural level, a new foundation for Europe. That's just not the way she operates. Her modus operandi is, I have a problem on my desk, I need to solve it. And so I don't see her coming up with big scenarios and grand bargains that would really reframe the way Germany is operating on a European level.
But 2 points on that. First point is, you never know with Merkel. I mean, Merkel is really, I mean, she can be also a total surprise to everybody. Just think about the decision to kind of stop all the nuclear power plants in Germany from one day to the other. Also the decision to open the German borders for the refugees overnight without consulting anybody. So I think she is also, or she has given us some surprises in the past, and if she thinks moment and time are right, then she is also, or it's also possible that she makes very harsh decisions from one moment to the other. And the other point I wanted to say, comparing Merkel's Europe view to that of Kohl's and Adenauer's, I think this is not the right way, because the European Union has changed so much. It is true that she doesn't consider maybe the core of the EU, the Franco-German tandem, as much as Helmut Kohl did that. But also the European Union is a different European Union now. And what I think is very dear to her heart is the cohesion of the EU 27. And that is, I think, something that is also a result of the last year. I think 2016 was a very wake-up call also for Germany. I think yes, she was not maybe a European by heart before, but I think the German government has realized Brexit as a decision that was something that was totally, the Germans didn't understand that. They don't understand that until this day, how a state can decide to leave the EU, because the EU, for the Germans, it's kind of, it's a project very dear to our heart. Yeah, as you said, it's home. It gives us the ability to feel well as Germans. That is what the EU allows us. So the EU, and that was really a moment. I remember that the morning when I woke up, political Berlin was like paralyzed when there was this Brexit decision, and we really thought it was the opposite of '89, like borders going up again instead of coming down. And then the Trump election was another game changer moment. And I think, and also the early attacks of Trump on the EU. I mean, he stopped that later, but in the first interview with the tabloid Bild, he said Brexit is a big success, or I will make Brexit a big success, and he said, I expect the EU to split up, and it's a German instrument anyway. So, and that, I think, really frightened the German government, and because Germany depends so much, as Fabian said, on the EU system, on the market, on this whole EU system, that it was a wake-up call for the Germans. And I think a priority to this German government and also to the next one under Merkel will be the cohesion of the EU 27, and that is not only to focus on France and Macron, but also not to lose Central Europe. And this, I think, will be a core interest of the next government.
I think if you take a bit of a synthesis of the two, that I think it is true that Merkel doesn't do the vision thing. So it is not her way of thinking. Her way is always small steps. It's always dealing with the problem which is there at that moment, rather than having a big vision of the future and where things are going to go. However, I think there has been that change in thinking. And that means, I think, for the first time, she would be ready to go along with someone else's grand bargain, especially if it goes beyond the Eurozone. Because the other issues which are still in the background, particularly the security issue and the migration issue, are still there. And that is something she knows will have to be dealt with. So if something comes from somewhere else, which she can support, which she can then partially own.
You mean Macron?
Macron.
And this is the most likely route of that is the old Franco-German route, whereby, and that I think is very clear in the German debate, she has moved a bit. She has signaled that on some of the issues where there were hardline positions beforehand, she's willing to move, but the underlying tone is still very much, but Macron has to deliver. Because if he doesn't deliver at home, we cannot believe this vision at the European level. So it is still very much about if Macron delivers particularly labor market reform, if he shows that France is reformable, then I think there's a willingness to move. And that would be greatly helped if she's in another grand coalition, because then she could again take the both sides and put them together into a centrist consensus.
Sí, yo siguiendo un poco la línea de Fabian, yo creo que Merkel representa un poco la mentalidad alemana. Y Pilar ha escrito un libro fenomenal, ¿no? Un poco también siguiendo la literatura que ha analizado Alemania. Alemania siempre ha sido un líder incómodo. Joschka Fischer lo dijo, ¿no? A nosotros esto de liderar, en alemán führen, no nos va muy bien. Y no somos muy buenos en ello, y cuando lo hacemos solemos fracasar. Por lo tanto, Alemania siempre ha tenido esa postura, ¿no? Después de la Segunda Guerra Mundial, creo que los que han analizado un poco la historia de la Unión Europea, los grandes visionarios han sido franceses, ¿no? Empezando por Schuman, Delors, incluso Mitterrand. Yo no creo que Kohl fuese el que tirase de Mitterrand, más que nada al revés. Era Mitterrand el que quería hacer grandes cosas y hacer la unión monetaria, y Kohl, un poco como dice Fabián, se dejó llevar. Es verdad que tenía cierta resistencia interna y ha sabido liderar a Alemania hacia ello, que eso hay que darse, pero creo que Merkel podría hacerlo. Entonces yo estoy totalmente convencido también, como dice Fabián, que todo va a depender un poco de cómo Macron utiliza esta oportunidad. Y mi temor, desde un punto de vista Elcano español, es que sabemos también cuál es la visión general de los presidentes franceses. Y Macron sigue un poco esa visión casi de Louis XIV, ¿no? Mucha pompa, mucho teatro, la unión de la patrie, o sea, intergubernamentalismo, que ahí es donde Francia tiene poder de veto, y eso es preocupante, porque al final, hablando de Alemania, no resuelves el problema alemán. La Unión Europea intergubernamental, y se vio con la crisis de Grecia, sobre todo en el 2012 y más en el 2015, es que en una Europa intergubernamental Alemania tiene un poder de veto enorme y tiene una responsabilidad enorme, y entonces está expuesta a unas críticas enormes. Entonces, si construimos un presupuesto de la zona euro de manera intergubernamental, cada uno pone su dinero, lo hacemos como si fuese el MEDE, el Mecanismo de Estabilidad Europeo, por lo tanto Alemania, Francia, Italia tienen poder de veto, algo que lógicamente a España no le interesa nada, entonces tenemos un problema, sobre todo si también vamos en esa línea de vamos a crear un Fondo Monetario Europeo, ¿no? Fondo Monetario Europeo que va a disciplinar a los países que se salen de la línea, y el Fondo Monetario Internacional puede disciplinar a países en Asia con el rechazo que después crea, o África o Latinoamérica, pero es que yo no veo a tecnócratas europeos disciplinando a estados soberanos europeos. Creo que esa dinámica nos lleva a una Europa problemática. Entonces yo creo que vamos a ver lo que Macron desarrolla a nivel de legitimación democrática de la gobernanza tanto del euro como de la Unión Europea a nivel europeo, ¿no? Él ha hablado muchas veces de que falta esa legitimación democrática, ha hablado incluso de convenciones democráticas, ¿no? Lo ha vuelto a repetir en Atenas, por lo tanto parece que es sensible a ese tema, pero vamos a ver cuán de europeísta es Macron. Por ahora, los más escépticos miramos a él y decimos, es mucho de palabra, pero poco de hechos, ¿no? Como se dice en inglés, he talks the talks, but he needs now to walk the walk. Y eso está por verse.
Gracias. A los cuatro vamos a pasar ya al turno de preguntas de ustedes, más, pero quiero dejarles la oportunidad. ¿Sí?
Thank you very much for the presentations. They were very interesting, regardless of the election is boring. My name is Otero. I'm also an analyst at Elcano. I have two questions. One is about Alternative for Deutschland, and it's the danger we have with the extreme right-wing party in the German system. Because the one thing they do is to change the discourse, to change the tone of the discussion. The other thing they might do, change some policies in Germany, starting with the refugee policy. How do you see this? What do you think about this? If the political party manages to take like around 10-12%, will there be any consequences policy-wise? And the second question is Turkey, because I think it was the only topic, or one of the only topics that Merkel went out of her comfort zone and pushed by Schulz. But while being pushed, the discussion was the accession negotiations of Turkey, in which they both know very well they need unanimity, and that will not happen with the 27 members or 28 members of the European Union. But there's still so much room for impact on bilateral relations. So is there any idea for punishment, sanctions, economic, military cooperation, or is it just electoral discourse of Merkel that we are seeing? Thank you.
Who is answering? I think Jana, maybe
you
AfD, and maybe
and I can
Turkey.
do Turkey.
Well, as you rightly said, AfD changes or has already changed the tone of the debate. When it comes to their actual impact on politics, I think it's more subtle. The thing is that when it comes to migration policy, Uli and I talked about this morning, that the Germans they like the idea to have open borders and to have everybody coming in, as long as people are not coming. So what Merkel did secretly, I mean, she publicly, she always says, I'm against any kind of upper limit, and but the current government has changed their laws a great deal. So already now it is very difficult, or much more difficult than before, to enter Germany and to stay, and that is something that there was a reaction already, and that is not only AfD driven, but the reality is that not only the 12% of the AfD voters were opposed to the initial Merkel approach of the welcoming culture. I mean, Germany, I think it was a moment I was very proud of my country and of my fellow Germans when that happened, but it only lasted, I think, actually until New Year's Eve 2015, 2016. That was a real game changer for Germany anyway. When in New Year's Eve there was this kind of event at in front of the Dome in Cologne that was an even greater game changer than the terror attack at the end of last year. So public debate already changed. The media covered this issue differently, and there are still a lot of people very welcoming, and I know personally a lot of friends of mine being active in helping refugees somehow, but the overall approach of the government has already changed. And I think that is not due to the AfD, that is due to the fact that a great deal of Germans wanted stricter rules and didn't like that. And I think actually you said we should owe, or Merkel owes her success or her new success to Donald Trump, and I think there is some cynicism some cynics in Germany say that Merkel owes it also to Viktor Orban and to Mr. Erdogan, because at the height of the refugee crisis, I said that in my last initial remarks, the support for Merkel was weakened, and Merkel was severely weakened within her own party. I personally talked a lot to CDU MPs who said the support for Merkel is shrinking in the CDU. And because until this election campaign where the AfD set this immigration topic again high on the agenda, the debate silenced in between a lot. So in the middle of 2017, refugees and migration and all that was not such a big issue, and the support for AfD dropped significantly. So as I think Fabian said, it's all a bit connected to how many refugees will come in and what we will see there, the support of the AfD and their impact.
I mean, in general, just briefly on the refugees, I mean, I think we have somehow in Europe, we didn't get at the heart of the matter, which is the whole Schengen system and our lack of joint asylum, a lack of a real joint border force, which is, there's some progress, but it's not really going towards the joint control of borders. So somehow, this moved in the background without being resolved. I mean, we keep our asylum system to feel good, and the reality is it's very difficult and ambiguous, also morally ambiguous. But I don't expect, and maybe my fellow discussants here have different views, but I don't expect that this will become a topic that will really come back on the agenda broadly. On Turkey, I think this is election posturing. Erdogan is an easy target. I have to say this is sometimes an unfortunate mix of feelings about Turks who are very present in Germany. So you have a right-wing element in this populist Turkey bashing or Erdogan bashing. Some mean Turks. Some mean the Islam, and some mean Erdogan. So Cem Özdemir, who is the head of one of the party leaders of the Greens, he comes from Turkey, so he is at the forefront of this, but I would say for good reasons, because he wants to use the EU internal influence to stop Erdogan from becoming a full-fledged autocrat. So there are different initiatives, but the government and even the foreign minister, Steinmeier, has been very cautious with Russia, always saying that there's more at stake than Erdogan. It's really about broader German-Turkish relations. It's about Syria, so Germany can have no influence on the EU. on what's happening in Syria without talking to Turkey about this. So there needs to be some realism. I think Merkel will, this will really disappear after the election. It's a very popular thing because, unfortunately, Turkey has put some journalists into prison, and there has been kind of escalation in the German-Turkish relationship. I hope this will go away, but Turkey remains a big problem, of course, in the whole question of accession and the relationship to the EU, and Erdogan puts all this into question. So the issue will remain very problematic, but I think the current heat it will be taken out after the election.
¿Alguien más? Perdón. Sí, Daniel.
Hablaba, creo que Ulrich Speck, de la situación económica, sí sigue siendo buena, que es excelente. En la última sesión en el Bundestag, Merkel dijo, cuidado porque podemos convertirnos en un museo de tecnología como el famoso de Múnich. Estados Unidos es un caos, evidentemente, pero, por suerte o por desgracia, tiene la punta. Está en el siglo XXI, Amazon, polémico Cabify, Uber, Tesla, por ejemplo, y Alemania está un poquito veraltet, ¿no? Aparte de esta balsa de aceite donde todo el mundo está dormido, ¿no? Dice Verslafen und veraltet, ¿no? Entonces está vendiendo todavía tecnología del siglo XIX, Carl-Benz, ciclo Otto, gasoil, diésel, Alfred diésel, el famoso. Hemos comprado diésel. La TÜV la impuso Alemania, ¿no? El Datenschutz, Alemania. El diésel hace 20 años lo imponía Alemania porque era bueno. Se ha demostrado una catástrofe que incluso es una catástrofe para el gobierno. Entonces, a pesar de mi respeto, he vivido muchos años en Alemania, está vendiendo unas cosas del siglo XIX, hierro, tecnología del XIX, mientras que ese país caótico, en lo político, evidentemente, está en la innovación. Tesla es el ejemplo. Entonces, todas las grandes marcas, porque el modelo alemán siempre es VW, Mercedes, Audi, el mito, el Made in Germany, pero Tesla les ha adelantado, me parece que por la derecha, es ilegal, pero les ha adelantado. Das läuft nicht. Una reflexión. Conmigo.
She needs the microphone.
19th century technology.
Es del siglo XX.
Now you have understood it, no?
Esto es del siglo XX.
Have you understood
Suga.
until now?
Okay, yes.
Sobre esta, esto dando baile, todo bien, los pajarillos cantan,
Without a mic, we have
It's going on.
Same question.
Fabian.
It's the same.
The German model. How sustainable? Pilar, ¿quieres coger unas cuantas?
No,
Y así
suba.
hacemos la última
Ah, va.
ronda.
Alternativa por Alemania, estoy de acuerdo que puede tener mucho más que esos 70 diputados que dicen que puede tener un Sprachrohr, hay un gran altavoz haciendo mucho ruido por encima del peso que tenga. Entonces, a lo mejor toda esta balsa de aceite pues se agita un poco. Digo, una reflexión me interesaría.
Hay más preguntas, sobre todo porque nos queda como un cuarto de hora y que querría... Vamos a coger unas cuantas preguntas. This one is for you.
Muchas gracias por la ponencia. Mi nombre es Rodrigo Álvarez, yo soy de Alfred Abogados, despacho hispano-alemán. Y lo primero, yo no creo que vaya a haber a otra canciller que no sea Merkel el resto de mi vida. Las preguntas son dos.
No,
Una es...
¿No vaya a haber?
Una canciller distinta a Merkel. Yo creo que ella va a terminar con todos nosotros. Y las preguntas son dos. Uno, en el régimen local o nacional alemán, ¿creen en una posible fusión, unión entre FDP y AfD? Y dos, el populismo está en toda Europa impregnado. ¿Por qué, o hay alguna razón que explique por qué en el norte de Europa el populismo, extremismo ha virado hacia la derecha y con Geert Wilders, Front National, etcétera, y en el sur de Europa con Syriza, 5 Stelle, Podemos, ha virado hacia la izquierda. Si hay alguna razón o algún... Muchas gracias.
¿Alguna pregunta más? Perdón. This last one
Sí,
for you.
muy breve.
And for Ulrich.
No sé si se escucha. Sí. ¿Se escucha? Perdón.
Sí.
Miguel, comentabas, habéis hecho en general como 2 reflexiones que me han parecido interesantes respecto a la posibilidad de que exista una transfer union, una unión fiscal en la Unión Europea. Comentabas por un lado que parece que tiene que ser el FDP el que la tenga que vehicular, ¿no? O el que consiga que haya más consenso en Alemania, si finalmente ocurre. Y por otro lado, que veremos a ver qué termina pasando con Macron y esa Francia que tradicionalmente ha apostado más por una Europa de los estados que de la gente. ¿No te parece que por ahí podría precisamente venir la clave y el trade-off? En un Macron dándole esto a Linde, o no sé cómo habéis comentado que se llamaba el líder de FDP, vamos. Esta sería la pregunta.
Bueno, vamos primero a estas 3. Fabian, sobre el tema de la falta de innovación en Alemania, aún así, si miramos los programas electorales de los principales partidos, vemos que muy alto está el tema de la digitalización y la necesidad de dar un impulso definitivo a la digitalización y al sistema digital en Alemania. Probablemente todo vaya un poco unido a esa falta de innovación o de modernización en los productos alemanes. Aunque bueno, habría que ver también si están anclados en productos muy seguros y muy garantizados en el mercado mundial, y por eso en ese sentido tampoco se quieren mover demasiado.
Yeah, I think this is not to sound complacent, but if this was true, then Germany wouldn't be in the situation it is now. Germany is incredibly successful because it sells high-tech goods. It doesn't sell low-tech products based on cheap labor. It couldn't do that. And even if you look at the old technologies, if you look at how much digitalization is now in the car industry, it is phenomenal. So we're not talking about an old-style product. We can argue about whether certain technologies will disappear, but it is actually sometimes surprising how resilient some technologies are over time, and that they are not going to disappear overnight. I think there's a recognition in Germany that happened before the diesel scandal already that things will have to change. So this whole push towards Industry 4.0, trying to push the industry both in the direction of sustainability and digitalization, did already get quite a lot of traction within Germany. Ironically, as a side remark, if you look at the diesel scandal, it was actually a digital product which caused all this problem, because that's what you use to manipulate the emissions. So it was a high-tech product which actually produced this. But we could also see that even after the diesel scandal, I think one of the most astonishing things is how quickly we recovered. This is a company which lost a huge amount of reputation, a huge amount also directly in money, and yet it shrugged it off within a year. This shows the resilience which is there. It shows the resilience which is there, and I think that resilience is going to continue. I think we will see a lot more public-private interaction in the direction of modernizing German industry. I think for me, working from a European perspective, the big question is whether that is going to be done within a European context or whether that is going to be done in the national context. But it's starting. I think it's interesting if you look at the German automobile exhibition. The amount of electric cars there was phenomenal. So it is starting to also go through the system. One very quick remark on EMU governance. I think if people expect that we will see huge steps, they will be disappointed. This is a very, very difficult topic, not just for Merkel. We shouldn't forget that there are other countries as well who think very similarly. In places like the Netherlands, in places like Finland, some of these issues are probably even more contentious in politics, but also on the other side, giving up certain levels of sovereignty to do things together at the European level. It's very, very difficult to convince people to do that. So what I think will happen is there will be a package, but we should see this package as a first step, which will make some small steps in the direction of certain things on which we can build if they are being successful. But it's not going to be the radical overhaul where we solve the problems of the EMU.
Jana, vamos a dividir la segunda pregunta quizá en dos partes. Quizá en dos partes, una FDP, el tema AfD, y la otra para Ulrich, la diferencia de los populismos de izquierdas en el sur de Europa, de derechas en el centro norte de Europa.
I got the easy question. I think there won't be a merger between AfD and FDP or AfD and CSU or any party in the foreseeable. Oh,
we really need to finish before 2. So these are the last. They're telling me that.
So there won't be any merger with any party. The AfD is in the corner. Nobody wants to play with them, and that will be for the foreseeable future. One remark about transfer union very quickly. I think it's not the FDP. I think it's Schäuble. That would be my guess. I think if Germany changes or the narrative changes, then it can only be done by Schäuble, because he is the most popular politician in Germany, because Germans really like him for the schwarze Null, black zero, because we trust him and we think he deals with our money in a sensible way. So if there will be a change, it will be not the FDP. They won't do it and they won't be credible, but Schäuble would be in the position to do that.
I have no answer to the question whether why in the south populism goes rather left, but I would probably also doubt it in the case of Italy. I'm not sure whether this is. I mean, you have Lega Norte
South of France.
In France, so maybe Spain is the exception.
In Portugal.
Maybe. So populism in FDP, I think there is a huge temptation for FDP because there is space with refugees and to become right-wing liberal. But I don't think they will go down that road, because they would leave the consensus, they would leave the center, and then you leave the place where power is. And AfD is outside, clearly outside any future power constellation. FDP wants to run things and not be at the fringe.
Miguel, Unión Fiscal rapidito.
Sí, yo creo que hay dos niveles ahí. Uno es el analítico, lo posible, y ahí estaría de acuerdo con Fabian ayer en la cena con Uri también. Creo que se van a dar pequeños pasos, no se va a crear la unión fiscal en 2 años. Pero yo creo que a mí lo que me preocupa es que Alemania cada vez se siente más cómoda en pues el método intergubernamental, el método este que Merkel ha llamado método de la unión, que está aparte del método comunitario. Entonces, crear, por ejemplo, un presupuesto de la zona euro fuera de las instituciones es problemático y creo que es una dirección errónea. Por lo tanto, sí que puedes tener razón de que pueda haber una cierta unión ahí entre los franceses y incluso la FDP, porque dicen, bueno, esto es simplemente una especie de presupuesto intergubernamental, por lo tanto no viene con ninguna cesión de soberanía, nos gusta, pero yo creo que desde el punto de vista alemán, que en cierto sentido, y no solamente alemán, pero también finlandés, holandés, etcétera, que es cómo hacemos que los países del sur hagan reformas. ¿Cómo hacemos que Grecia haga reformas? Por el método intergubernamental no se va a lograr. Solo se va a lograr si hay una legitimación de una autoridad supranacional europea que pueda imponer ciertas reformas o que tenga cierto control de... Y Lindner, yo que estuve mirando las entrevistas, Lindner en principio apunta ahí, dice, Francia quiere mutualización de gasto, pero ¿dónde está la mutualización del control? Que ha sido siempre la línea alemana, ¿no? O sea, una cosa es compartir la tarjeta de crédito, pero después, cuando compartamos la tarjeta de crédito, ¿quién controla cuánto se gasta? Y yo creo que ahí también, por ese lado, solo se puede hacer a nivel comunitario, porque es la única manera de tener poder en el centro para hacer las reformas y tener un nivel de apropiación de esas reformas, ¿no? O sea, una legitimación, eso vía el Parlamento Europeo o una Cámara o una comisión dentro del Parlamento Europeo para la zona euro, o pues mayor participación de los parlamentos nacionales en ese proceso. Algo hay que hacer, yo acabo con esto. Hemos dedicado años, Fabian entre ellos, muchos de nosotros, dedicado años a decir qué es necesario a nivel económico para que el euro funcione. Y ahí tenemos un consenso amplio. A mí me gustaría que las mejores mentes de europeas en Bruselas dedicasen solo 6 meses a trabajar, diseñar esa parte en los informes de los 4 presidentes, de los 5 presidentes, que se dedica a la unión política. Esa parte que siempre es residual y vaga, pues darle un poquito más de músculo y a ver si buscamos maneras de avanzar en la democratización de la arquitectura.
Bueno, ya no hay tiempo para mucho más porque hay que acabar como muy tarde a las 2. Gracias Ulrich, gracias Jana, gracias Fabian, gracias Miguel. Gracias a ustedes. Espero que el debate haya sido bastante más animado que la aburrida campaña electoral alemana. Gracias.